Hi everyone, and welcome back to our study of Acts. Today we're going to be talking about Acts chapter 16, when Timothy joins Paul, Silas, and of course Luke, who is writing this book. But what happened at the end of chapter 15? What happened between Paul and Barnabas? Well, they split up. They had a disagreement. Do you remember what the disagreement was about? It was about John Mark, who is Barnabas's nephew, his sister's son. And you can reread that chapter if you want to find out more detail on their argument there. So who does Paul take up with? Well, Silas, as you can tell from the title of this. And who is Silas anyway? Where do we know him from? Well, he was, according to church history, he was one of the 70. Remember, Jesus sent out 70 two by two to go preach the gospel, cast out demons, heal the sick, and so forth. And he was one of the 70 there. But he was also in Jerusalem when they went for the Jerusalem Council to find out, what are we going to do about the Gentiles? And so he was part of that delegation. All right, so this is who Paul is going to be traveling with. And then where do they end up going? Well, they're in Syria, and then they're going to be traveling north and northwest into the region that is called Turkey at the time. It's also called Asia or Asia Minor. And so now let's go ahead and start in chapter 16. And I'm going to be using a map that I have that I like to help you understand a little bit better where we're talking about. So this is our map, and they come from this area here in Syria, and their first stop is going to be in Derbe, all right? And by the way, Barnabas and his nephew John Mark are on the island of Cyprus here, and so they're checking on the churches that Paul and Barnabas had started there. All right, so in Acts chapter 16 and verse 2, Timothy is described as well-known and highly respected among the believers of both Lystra and Iconium. So they travel actually from Derbe about 60 miles to the west to Lystra, which is Timothy's hometown, and then just a little bit north is Iconium. And that is the two cities where Timothy is well known. And I find that to be a really nice description of somebody. Do people know you in your hometown? Do they know you in the next town next to your hometown? And do they know you for good things? I mean, that's what we want, right? Is for them to know you for good things. And so what do we know about Timothy? Well, Timothy, we can learn a lot from actually 2 Timothy 1:5, the letter that Paul wrote to him. We know that his mother's name is Eunice and that she is a Jew, a practicing Jew. We also know that his grandmother, Lois, is also Jewish because Paul mentions that in this letter. We also find out that Timothy's father is a non-Jew, or the description is that he's Greek. It doesn't mean that he's really Greek, like the nationality. It just means that he's a non-Jew. Also described as an Aramaic speaker, which would be like the lingo for he's a non-Jew. But that was the language of that area for that time. All right. In Acts chapter 16 and verse 3, we learn something else interesting about Timothy. And I'll be reading this from the Passion Translation. Paul recognized God's favor on Timothy's life and wanted him to accompany them in ministry. But Paul had Timothy circumcised first because of the significant Jewish community living in the region, and everyone knew that Timothy's father wasn't a Jew. So first, I want you to recognize that we should have our spiritual eyes and ears open to when God has his favor on somebody's life. We should see that, we should hear it, and then we should act on it like Paul did. And then secondly, why would Dr. Luke include this description of Timothy's father? Well, at the time, and things have changed, but at the time, the bloodline was traced through the father. And so it was very important for them to know that Timothy's father was a non-Jew. And so Timothy is described as not a Jew. And so Paul wants to have him circumcised so that they don't have to go through, that conversation. All right, so Timothy joins Paul, Silas, and Luke on their missionary journeys. And while they're preaching and teaching the good news, remember that they're also bringing to the Gentiles who are believers, they're bringing them the decree and the guidelines put forth through the Jerusalem Council that we talked about. I believe that was in chapter 14. All right, so all the congregations are doing well. They're growing daily. Everyone is strengthening their faith in the Lord. And then we come to Acts 16, verse 6 in the Passion Translation. We learn that the Holy Spirit had forbidden, Paul and his partners to preach the word in the southwestern provinces of Turkey. So they ministered throughout the region of central and west central Turkey. Again, called Asia. This is the far western and southwestern provinces of Asia Minor. So they'll be going from where they are here west. All right, so you get that picture in your mind. And then they get as far as the borders of Mysia. I think that's how you pronounce that. I'm going to show you. It's M-Y. Here it is, M-Y-S-I-A. They get as far as those borders, and they repeatedly attempt to go north to Bithynia. That's how I'm pronouncing it. I hope that's right. It's B-I-T-H-Y-N-I-A. But they are forbidden by the Spirit of the Lord to go there. Now, why is it important to listen to the Holy Spirit? Well, it's because he knows everything and he knows everybody. So it's really important to listen to him if you want to have success. And so they go through Mysia. They don't stop there, but they go through there, and they're heading to the port of Troas. And you can see Troas on my map. It's right there. If you have your own Bible map, use it so that you can see where that is. And then they're going to be heading north, or they're going to be heading west, but Troas is between Troy and Assos, if you're having trouble finding that on your map. Now let's read verses 9 and 10 in the Amplified Classic. It says, "There a vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man from Macedonia stood pleading with him, saying, 'Come over to Macedonia and help us.' And when he had seen the vision, we, including Luke, at once endeavored to go into Macedonia, confidently inferring that God had called us to proclaim the good tidings, or the gospel, to them." And so this area that they're about to endeavor is about 739 kilometers or 460 miles by land. Now, let me show you what I'm talking about. So by land, they'll go here and all the way into the area called Macedonia. All right, but they do take a shortcut, which is good. And they take off from Troas and they go across, and they're going to go to this island here, which is the island of Samothrace. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And they spend a night there, and then they go north to Neapolis, and then finally on to Philippi, which is a major city in this Roman province of Macedonia. And so some translations say that they stayed there until everybody knew us. They stayed a number of days. We were there over certain holy days. But you get the idea that they were there for a period of time, probably a long period of time, because of the distance that they are traveling. Now, on the Sabbath, they went outside the city gates of Philippi, and nearby they saw a house or a place of prayer. And this is implied in the Greek, and it is explicit in the Aramaic. And but it doesn't say that they go inside there, which is interesting. Instead, they strike up a conversation with the women who are gathered at the river there. So apparently we can assume that the women were not invited into this congregation, this house of prayer. I did a mission trip in Romania years ago. It was in the early 90s. And the basilica there had a similar situation. So the women could go inside the hallway, but in the main part of of the gathering place, it was only men. Of course, I did not know that as a missionary in my first trip there. And I walked straight through where all the men were, and I didn't find it strange at all. I didn't know that it was just men in there. But anyhow, you can assume maybe that's what was the case here. Now, do you remember one of the names of the women that they met by the riverside? If you said Lydia, you are correct. So let's go ahead and read verse 14. This is the Passion Translation. One of them was Lydia, a businesswoman from the city of Thyatira, who was a dealer of exquisite purple cloth and a Jewish convert. While Paul shared the good news with her, God opened her heart to receive Paul's message. Now, I want you to think, why is it significant that Luke would include that she is a dealer or a seller of this exquisite purple cloth? Well, who can afford this? The wealthy people, that's right. So God is actually opening up a door for the gospel to go to the wealthy people, because Lydia is getting saved and she's going to tell her clients about Jesus, which is really exciting. All right, so Lydia had converted to Judaism and now is a Christian, and she is devoting herself to the Lord. And she is baptized along with all of her family, and she invites the missionaries to stay with her while they are in town. All right, now this brings us to Acts chapter 16 and verse 16. Now Luke is speaking, and he says, "One day as we were going to the house of prayer, we encountered a young slave girl who had an evil spirit of divination, the spirit of Python. She had earned great profits for her owners by being a fortune teller." All right, in the religious context of Greek mythology, she was an oracle, a medium who had the spirit of the gods, remember that's a small g, speaking through her to foretell the future. Now, evil spirits do have access to our lives if they are permitted. Now, notice that these people were seeking their fortune to be told, and that is when the evil spirits can go to work on you. So I want to leave you with this thought before we go on to part 2, that please do not give them permission to have access to your life, because this spirit in particular is called Python, and he is descriptive of Apollo, the Greek god of prophecy. And an individual, usually a young virgin girl, would become an oracle of Apollo, and she would be known as the Python or the Pythenia. And I want you to reflect on this story, and we will be back for part 2. Goodbye.